You know, this would have to be one of Stephen King's best collections he's ever released. I'm talking the best in 20 years. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. You're with Chris, and today I'll be giving my spoiler-free review of You Like It Darker by Stephen King, his latest collection of short stories. I, along with everyone else in the fandom, has been looking forward to this, and I had a really good time with it. Now, is it a perfect collection? No. There were a couple of stories that didn't quite work for me. They didn't quite do it, but there were a lot of standouts on the other hand, which I am going to be talking to you about today. So let's start how I always like to, with the back cover blurb, with what it's all about. You like it darker? Fine, so do I, writes Stephen King in the afterword to this magnificent new collection of 12 stories that delve into the darker part of life. Both metaphorical and literal, King has for half a century been a master of the form, and these stories about fate, mortality, luck, and the folds in reality where anything can happen are as rich and riveting as his novels. Both weighty in theme and a huge pleasure to read, King writes to feel the exhilaration of leaving ordinary day-to-day life behind, and in You Like It Darker, readers will feel that exhilaration too again and again. Talented Bastids explores the long-hidden secret of how the eponymous gentlemen got their skills. In Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, a brief and unprecedented psychic flash upends dozens of lives. Danny's most catastrophically. In Rattlesnakes, a sequel to Cujo, a grieving widower travels to Florida for respite and instead receives an unexpected inheritance with major strings attached. In The Dreamers, a taciturn-Vietnam vet answers a job ad and learns that there are some corners of the universe left unexplored. The Answer Man asks if prescience is good luck or bad, and reminds us that a life marked by unbearable tragedy can still be meaningful. Alright, and it says King's ability to surprise, amaze, and bring us both terror and solace remains unsurpassed. Each of these stories holds its own thrills, joys, and mysteries. Each feels iconic. You like it darker? You got it. Alright, so let's start with some first impressions of the book. Now, having a look at this thing, it is a little bit of a chunker. It is at least just under 500 pages. So going into it, I was very optimistic because I do have a lot of faith in Stephen King's writing. He surprised me a little bit. I think he surpassed my expectations with the writing quality within. And, the cover art, it's okay. It didn't blow me away. I think the US cover is a little bit better in my opinion, but, it doesn't matter what the cover looks like. It's the content inside that matters. Now, I'm going to talk to you about at least 7 or 8 stories that really left a mark on me. And, they differ in style somewhat, but they also have recurring themes, and two of the stories in particular have a subtle crossover. And I think the thing I liked most about the collection overall is how a lot of the stories were set in Castle County, so you get to revisit certain locations, and there are plenty of Easter eggs to find within this collection. So first up we have Talented Bastids, which is a very, very strong first story to kick the collection off. It was really thought-provoking. It had a little bit of magic in there. It's about two best friends who, they live in the same area and they're best friends, and they live relatively ordinary lives. They both are co-owners in a local refuse yard or junkyard, and there's nothing too remarkable about their lives until a hunting expedition in the woods changes them in some way. And what happens is, all of a sudden, they both have certain creative avenues that they're okay at. And after going on this hunting trip within the woods, things start to happen where all of a sudden they both elevate and peak in their respective creative pursuits. But it doesn't go unnoticed. There's a local reporter who sniffs out this story and believes that these two ordinary individuals from the same area couldn't have achieved success at the same time like they did. Okay, so to say any more would be spoiling everything, but I think what actually happens in the woods, which I'm not going to spoil here, is it's very out there, but very it's it's very compulsive to read about. I would have liked a whole novel on this story. It's not too long, but I wouldn't have had any trouble reading a full-length novel with these two characters and what actually happens in the woods that changes them, essentially. And I think the overall theme of the story is about friendship at its core, and how friendship can endure not only in ordinary circumstances, but after having a shared experience. That can only be enhanced, couldn't it? So I think the friendship aspect of the story was very, very moving, and the wrap up of the story and the truth behind what happened in the woods to cause these changes in their respective fields of creativity is very, very interesting. And it was a very, very strong entry, very, very strong first story to kick things off and really set the tone and really settled me in for a hell of a ride, because after reading this first story, I knew I was in for a treat with a lot of these stories moving forward. The Fifth Step is a really good, short, punchy story with a hell of a twist at the end. It's about a man who is an alcoholic, a recovering alcoholic, and part of his tasks set from his sponsor is to go and seek out a stranger and confess some sins to a complete stranger and offer them money in return for having them listen to certain sins and whatnot. And he finds someone who is begrudgingly willing to do that, and he goes and tells him some stories and things like that. And just when you get to the end, you are gut punched with the horrifying twisty end, which was just absolutely fantastic. So it was very, very short, but very, very intense, and packs a punch right at the end, what I call the sting in the tail twist, which was excellent. So definitely King was on a roll here. Next up, I have Willie the Weirdo, which was another short piece about an acquitted teenager in the murder of a local girl, local homeless person. And it was a really good, short, effective piece about a mother's morals, how they're affected, and ultimately what she has to do, which, is the teenager guilty or is he not? It was a very short, punchy piece, and it was quite horrifying when you learn the truth about what actually happened, and the dilemma a mother faces with her child, questioning whether he is innocent or guilty. It was a really good, thought-provoking one. Yes, Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, my favourite story of the entire collection, which is a little bit weird because it's not your run-of-the-mill horror story. It is a crime story and a police procedural. Now, a lot of Stephen King fans don't like that aspect of his writing. I loved the Bill Hodges trilogy. I do like this aspect of his writing, and being that thriller is my go-to genre, it's my jam, it's my default genre that I love, I absolutely love this. And despise the detective, the Kansas State investigator in this one. So on one end of the spectrum, you have a Kansas State investigator, and on the other, you have a humble janitor who works at a local high school who calls in an anonymous tip on a body he finds. And he's just doing his civic duty, but he doesn't want any attention associated with that. And what happens is it seems pretty harmless, but then he comes under suspicion for murdering this individual. So without spoiling anything, what happens is a cat and mouse game between the main character and the state investigator, who I grew to despise, because despite all the evidence to the contrary that doesn't pin him, the main character, in the crime, this state investigator just keeps digging and digging and is relentless. And in the end, I just absolutely despised him. And there's a couple of twists and turns along the way, and it upends so many lives in the process. And it was just a really good, compelling story that I just read in one sitting. It was absolutely incredible, and I loved it. And it is definitely my favourite of the collection. Next up we had Red Screen, which was another short punchy one where it's alluded to that aliens have infiltrated humanity, and it manifests in a very, very strange way. So we have one character who his wife's nagging at him, and these naggings tend to be symptoms of something that's really happening, and it turns out to be fairly normal and everything's fine, but then the red screen that appears at the end to the main character indicates that something's not right, which is all I'm going to say about that one. Yes, Rattlesnakes is the sequel to Cujo, so I didn't know what to expect with this one. We have Vic Trenton, Tad's father, and we know that Tad died from dehydration back in the Canberra's dooryard. Sheriff Bannerman got killed by Cujo, and Donna Trenton killed Cujo with a baseball bat. So there's a lot of references back to Vic's painful past as he tries to put the pieces together and still move on from it as an old man. So the wounds are still there that obviously don't heal over time. And there's a supernatural twist in this one which is introduced, and it's set in an island in Florida, Rattlesnake Island, and rattlesnakes are featured in this story as an element, but I like how Stephen King used the rattlesnakes as a metaphor for the upheaval and grief in Vic's life. It's termed as horrible memories can either bite you or not, and there was a nice little metaphor drawn between rattlesnakes in the literal sense and rattlesnakes as a metaphor. And he becomes the sole beneficiary of a lady's estate down there who dies, and he only met her twice. And there is baggage he inherits, if I can say, in the form of something supernatural that occurs, which is very, very interesting. And I enjoyed it a lot. It was quite a long story, but it was very compelling, and the references made to other Stephen King works in the multiverse is very, very good, and it was just a really good story to read. The Dreamers. This was a disturbing one. It was about a scientist's experimentation in hypnotizing people who he suggests them to look at a picture of a house and try and do things in the house and lift up the boards and things like that, and the horrifying consequences of such an experiment. It was horrifying. It was a scary story to read about. Again, it was a short one, and I really, really enjoyed it, and it was very, very thought-provoking. There are references to Carl Jung's psychology, and it's just a horrifying premise, and it was very, very, very good to read, and I would thoroughly recommend that one as well. Okay, so some final thoughts here. Some of the stories were set back a couple of years ago, so you are going to get references to real life issues that King has written about before, which can be quite mildly annoying, but given that they were written during that time, I'll forgive it. Overall, the stories were pretty good. There are a couple that didn't quite ring true with me. There are plenty of Easter eggs to find if you know where to look for them. Some are very, very subtle, some are very, very obvious, which I'm not going to tell you about any of those. You'll just have to read and find out and find them for yourself, which is one of the most fun things about reading a Stephen King book, where you know there are going to be Easter eggs there to hunt for, and when you find them, it's a real treat to do that, and there are plenty. You know, I thought the themes in this one were very, very good. There were themes of loss and grief and brotherhood and guilt, but I absolutely really enjoyed this collection, and I would thoroughly recommend you pick it up, because I guarantee from the first story you will be hooked. And you know, the two Talented Bastids, it was a hell of an opener for a collection and really sets the tone, and you are in for a good ride with this one. I thoroughly recommend it. So that is it, guys, for my spoiler-free review of You Like It Darker. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Offer up any feedback, of course. If you've read the book already, let's compare notes. Tell me what you liked about it. I'll always deliver the best content I can. But until the next video, guys, happy reading.